The summer of 1972 came to Virginia like a weight pressing down on the land. The heat was thick, and the air was still, and in the small town of Whitfield, they were burying Sheriff Robert Hayes. I stood at the back of the cemetery, watching them lower my father into the ground. 26 years old, back from Vietnam for 3 months, still not used to the quiet. The preacher spoke words I didn't hear. The mourners wiped tears I didn't shed. My father had been a pillar of this community, a man of law and order, a man everyone respected. I knew better. The sound of footsteps on gravel, a woman approaching. She appeared like a ghost from that summer 10 years ago. Sarah Mitchell. Older now, lines around her eyes, but still beautiful. Still the woman who taught me that love and betrayal are sometimes the same thing. She stood beside me, didn't speak, just placed a hand on my arm. I looked down at that hand, the same hand that had held mine in a summer storm, the same hand that had destroyed everything I believed about my father, about love, about the world. "Hello, Tommy," she said quietly. I hadn't been called Tommy in 10 years. The war had made me Tom, Sergeant Hayes, a man who'd seen things that made childhood seem like a dream from another life. "Sarah, I'm sorry about your father." I wanted to laugh. Sorry. What did sorry mean? Sorry for what happened that summer? Sorry for loving him? Sorry for breaking a 16-year-old boy's heart? But I said nothing. Just watched him fill in the grave. Sarah spoke again, her voice carrying a weight I recognized. Regret. "Do you ever think about that summer? 1962? I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was 16 again. It was June. The corn was growing tall, and Sarah Mitchell had just arrived to spend the summer with her sister, my mother's best friend, in the house next to our farm. That was the summer I learned what it meant to fall in love, and the summer I learned that some loves destroy everything they touch.
June 1962, Whitfield, Virginia. I was 16 years old that summer, old enough to drive, too young for anything that mattered, tall for my age but awkward with it, all arms and legs, and not quite knowing what to do with either. My father was the town sheriff. My mother had died 4 years before. It was just the two of us in that big farmhouse on the edge of town. People said I was lucky to have him, a father who was respected, admired, a pillar of the community. But respect doesn't fill a house, and admiration doesn't sit across from you at the dinner table. Most nights my father came home after I'd gone to bed. I'd hear his boots on the stairs, hear his door close. In the morning, he'd be gone before I woke. A note on the counter. Instructions for the day. Feed the chickens. Fix the fence. Mow the lawn. The house was always clean. The chores were always done. But it felt empty in a way I couldn't name, like living in a museum. Everything preserved. Nothing alive. I did what he asked. Always. Because that's what you do when you're trying to earn something you can't name. Trying to fill a space that's shaped like attention, like being seen. My father wore his badge like it was part of his skin. Silver. Always polished. When I was little, I used to sneak into his room just to look at it on his dresser. The way it caught the light. The weight of it in my hand when I dared to pick it up. I thought that someday I'd wear one just like it. That I'd be just like him. Strong. Fair. Unshakable. But mostly, I thought that if I became like him, maybe he'd finally look at me the way he looked at that badge. With pride. With purpose. With something that felt like love. That summer, I was desperate for something to happen. Anything. I'd wake up feeling like I was suffocating, Like the town was too small. Like my life was a script someone else had written, and I was just reading the lines. I wanted to be somewhere else. Someone else. Someone who mattered. That was before Sarah. Before I learned that wanting to escape can trap you in ways you never imagined. She arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a pale blue Chevrolet convertible. I was in the cornfield, walking the rows like my father had taught me, checking for pests. But really I was just walking. Just being somewhere he might notice if he drove past. If he bothered to look. He never did. I heard the car before I saw it. Heard the engine cut. Heard a door slam. Then I heard a woman's voice. Not loud. Just present. The way some voices are. Like they take up more space than their volume suggests. I pushed through the corn to the edge of the field. She was standing in front of the Mitchell house next door, talking to Mrs. Mitchell, her aunt. I couldn't see her face clearly from that distance. Just shapes. A woman in a yellow dress. Dark hair. The way she moved, confident, unhurried, told me she was older than me. Not a girl from school. A woman from somewhere else. Somewhere that mattered. Mrs. Mitchell said something. The woman laughed. And something in that laugh made me stop. Made me listen. It wasn't a polite laugh, or a careful one. It was the kind of laugh that said she didn't care who heard her, didn't care what they thought. I'd been careful my whole life. Quiet. Trying not to take up too much space in case my father needed that space for something more important. For his work. For his duty. For anything but me. But this woman laughed like she'd never learned to be small. I wanted that. Wanted to know what it felt like to exist without apology. That evening, my father came home in his patrol car. I was on the porch, pretending to read but really watching the house next door, hoping to see her again, hoping to hear that laugh. My father climbed out of the car. Tall, broad shoulders. The badge catching the evening sun. He looked tired. He always looked tired. Evening, son. Evening, sir. He started toward the house, then stopped. Looked over at the Mitchell house. His jaw tightened. Just for a second. But I saw it. I hear Sarah Mitchell's come to stay for the summer. Yes, sir. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you stay away from her, Tommy. She's too old for you. And she's... He trailed off, shook his head. Just stay away from her. It was the first time my father had ever warned me away from anything without giving a reason. The first time I heard something in his voice that wasn't law and order and duty. It sounded almost like fear. I should have listened. But when you're 16 and you've spent 4 years trying to get your father to notice you exist, and suddenly he's warning you away from something, someone with that kind of urgency in his voice, well, you pay attention to that person, because they must matter. They must be important. They must be the kind of person who makes people feel things. And I wanted to matter like that. Wanted to be important. Wanted someone, anyone, to feel something when they looked at me. The next morning, I was fixing the fence along our property line when she appeared. Just walked right up like we'd known each other for years. You're Tommy Hayes, aren't you? The sheriff's son? I nearly dropped my hammer. Up close, she was older than I'd thought. Not a girl. A woman. How much older, I couldn't say. Old enough that the distance between us felt vast. Her eyes were green. Deep green. The kind that made you think she was looking through you, not at you. Yes, ma'am. She laughed. That same laugh from yesterday. Don't call me ma'am. I'm not that old. Call me Sarah. Yes, Ma. Sarah. She leaned against the fence post, watching me work. There was something tired in her face, something that made her seem both young and very old at the same time. "Your father's the sheriff?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, softer. "He seems like a good man, the kind of man who knows what he wants, who doesn't waver." There was something strange in her voice, something I couldn't identify, like she was asking a question without asking it, like she already knew him but was pretending she didn't. "He is," I said. He's everything." The words came out before I could stop them. Embarrassing. Childish. The kind of thing that revealed too much. But Sarah didn't laugh. She just looked at me. Really looked at me, like she was seeing something. "Everything," she repeated softly. "That must be hard. Trying to live up to everything." My throat tightened. No one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever noticed that the weight of everything might be heavy. I looked up at her, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that made me want to stay, to talk, to be seen. She looked sad, but not for herself, for me. Like she understood what it meant to be the person standing in someone else's shadow, trying to earn light. And I thought, foolishly, desperately, that maybe she saw me, that maybe I mattered to her. I didn't understand yet that when someone sees their own pain reflected in you, they're not seeing you at all. Over the next week, I found excuses to be wherever she was. I helped Mrs. Mitchell fix her porch railing, volunteered to mow their lawn, anything to be near her, anything to hear her voice, to be in her presence. Because when Sarah talked to me, I felt like I existed, like I mattered, like I wasn't just the sheriff's quiet son who did his chores and stayed out of the way. She'd bring me lemonade, sit on the porch steps and talk to me while I worked. She told me about the city, about books and music and ideas that made the world feel bigger than Whitfield, about places where people talked about things that mattered. But more than that, she listened. When I talked about feeling invisible, about trying to make my father proud, about not knowing who I was supposed to be, she listened like it mattered, like I mattered. She never talked about herself, though, not really. When I asked why she'd come to Whitfield for the summer, she just said, "I needed to get away from the city for a while." When I asked if she had family there, she looked away. Not anymore. When I asked if she'd ever been to Whitfield before, her face did something strange. A long time ago. When I was very young, too young to understand anything, I didn't press. I was afraid if I asked too many questions, she'd stop talking to me, stop seeing me. I didn't understand then that she wasn't really listening to me. She was listening to her own echo, hearing her own loneliness in my words, finding comfort in the fact that someone else understood what it meant to love someone who couldn't love you back. I thought she saw me, but really, she was just looking in a mirror, and I was young enough, lonely enough, to mistake that for connection. One afternoon, I worked up the courage to give her something. I'd saved up money from helping at the feed store. Rode my bicycle 15 miles to the record shop in the next town over. I bought her a record. Unchained Melody. It was playing on the radio everywhere that summer. I thought she'd like it, but really I was giving it to her because the title said everything I felt and couldn't say. Unchained. Free. The way she seemed to be. The way I wanted to be. She opened the door in a white blouse and blue jeans, barefoot, hair down. For a moment she looked so young, so vulnerable. "Tommy, what is it?" I held out the record, my hands were shaking. I got you this. I thought you said you like music." She took it carefully, looked at the cover. When she looked back at me, her eyes were shining with tears. "Oh, Tommy," her voice broke. This is very sweet." She reached out and touched my cheek. Just for a second, her hand was cool, gentle. But the way she looked at me, it wasn't the way I wanted her to look at me. It was the way you look at something fragile, something that reminds you of pain you're trying to forget. "You're a good boy, Tommy Hayes." Boy, not man. Boy. And in that moment, I should have understood. Should have seen that what I felt wasn't what she felt. That I was offering love, and she was accepting comfort. But I was 16, and desperate to matter to someone. So I smiled, and I asked, would you like to walk? I could show you the old mill down by the creek." She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw something flicker across her face. Conflict. Like she knew this was a bad idea. Like she knew I was misunderstanding everything. But then she looked back at the house, at my father's house next door, at his patrol car in the driveway, and she said I'd love that. Not because she wanted to walk with me, but because she wanted to be close to something that reminded her of him. I just didn't know it yet. We walked through the cornfield as the sun began to set. The corn was as tall as we were now, almost 7 feet. It created walls on either side of us. A green maze that smelled like earth and growth and summer. Sarah walked beside me, running her hands along the corn tassels. "It's beautiful here. Peaceful." "It's boring," I said. "Nothing ever happens in Whitfield." She laughed. "You say that like it's a bad thing." She was quiet for a moment, then spoke softer. "Tommy, perfect people. People like your father. Sometimes I wonder if they ever get tired. Of being perfect, I mean. If they ever wish they could just stop." I frowned. My father's not tired. He loves his job. I'm sure he does. She smiled, but it was strange. Knowing. I'm sure he does. We reached the old mill. It hadn't run in 20 years. Just a shell now. Stone walls and a rusted wheel. But the creek still ran clear and cold beside it. Sarah sat on the old millstone. I sat beside her. Not too close. Close enough to smell her perfume. Something floral. Jasmine, maybe. "Can I tell you something, Tommy?" "Anything." She looked at the water. "I came here to escape. From the city. From complications. I thought a summer in a small town would be simple. Uncomplicated." "Is it?" She turned to me. Smiled sadly. "No, it's not." I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she stood up. "It's getting dark. Your father will worry." She was wrong about that. My father never worried about me. He was too busy with the town, with his duty, with his badge. But I stood anyway, walked her home through the cornfield as the fireflies began to glow. At her door, she turned. "Thank you for the record, Tommy, and for the walk. You're very special, you know that?" Then she went inside, left me standing in the twilight, 16 years old and completely, hopelessly in love. I walked home across the field. My father's patrol car was in the driveway, but he wasn't inside. I saw his silhouette on the back porch, smoking. He rarely smoked. "Evening, son. Evening." You were with her, weren't you? Sarah Mitchell. I stopped. We just walked to the old mill, that's all. He was quiet for a long time. The cigarette glowed red in the darkness. Tommy, I need you to listen to me. Sarah Mitchell is not who you think she is. There are things about her past. You need to stay away from her. Why? What things? That's not your concern. Just trust me. I should have asked more questions, should have demanded answers, but I was 16 and afraid to challenge my father. So I just said, yes, sir, but I didn't mean it. It happened on a Thursday, 2 weeks after Sarah arrived. I was in the barn, organizing tools. My father was on patrol. The afternoon had been hot and still, the kind of stillness that meant a storm was coming. The rain started without warning. One moment the sky was clear. The next, it was black. Lightning split the sky. Thunder shook the ground. Rain came down in sheets. I heard running footsteps, saw a yellow blur through the rain. Sarah burst into the barn, soaked through, her sundress clinging to her, hair plastered to her face. She was laughing. Jesus, that came out of nowhere. I grabbed an old blanket from the shelf, handed it to her. You okay? I'm fine. I was walking back from town and she looked down at herself, laughed again. I'm drowned. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, looked around the barn, at the old tractor, the tools, the hay bales stacked in the corner. Your barn? Yes. It's nice. Smells like, I don't know, childhood. Thunder crashed. The rain got heavier. Sarah moved deeper into the barn, away from the open door. I followed. She sat down on a hay bale, looked up at me. Sit with me. Until the storm passes? I sat. Not too close. Close enough. For a while, we just listened to the rain on the tin roof. It was loud, almost deafening, but somehow peaceful. Sarah spoke over the rain. Do you know any poetry, Tommy? No, we don't really. We read practical things. Farming books, repair manuals. She smiled. Would you like to hear a poem? Sure. She closed her eyes. When she spoke, her voice changed, became softer, more musical. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. The words washed over me. I didn't understand them. Not really. But they sounded beautiful in her voice. She opened her eyes. Robert Frost, do you like it? I don't understand it. You don't have to understand poetry. You just have to feel it. She looked at me. What do you feel when you hear those words? I thought about it. Lonely. I feel lonely. She nodded. Yes, Frost knew loneliness. He knew what it meant to walk alone. Are you lonely, Sarah? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, sometimes, even in a crowd, especially in a crowd. Lightning flashed. For a second, the whole barn lit up. I saw her face clearly, saw something in her eyes that looked like pain. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Loneliness isn't always bad. Sometimes it's just honest. She stood up. Let the blanket fall. Her dress was starting to dry. She held out her hand. Dance with me. What? There's no music. We don't need music, come on. I stood, took her hand. My heart was hammering. She placed my other hand on her waist, put her hand on my shoulder. We moved slowly, awkwardly. There was no rhythm, no beat, Just two people swaying in a barn while rain drummed on the roof. "You're not bad at this," she said. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I. That's what makes it perfect." We danced, and for those few minutes, nothing else existed. Not my father, not the farm, not the fears between us. Just her and me and the rain. She looked up at me. We were close now, so close I could see the water droplets still clinging to her eyelashes. "Tommy." "Yes?" "You're going to break hearts someday. You know that?" My mouth was dry. "I don't want to break hearts. I just want—" "What do you want?" "You. I want you. I want this moment to last forever. I want to be the kind of man you could love." But before I could speak, she stepped back, dropped her hands. The rain's stopping. She was right. The storm was moving on. The rain was lighter now, the thunder distant. "I should go. My aunt will worry." "Sarah, wait. She turned, looked at me with those green eyes. "What is it, Tommy?" I wanted to tell her everything. That I loved her, that I thought about her every waking moment, that I'd give anything to be older, to be someone she could see as more than just a boy. But I was 16, and the words died in my throat. Nothing, just "thank you for the dance." She smiled. "Say it again." "Thank you for letting me hide from the rain." She started to leave, stopped at the barn door, turned back. "You're too young to understand this yet, Tommy. But someday you will." Then she was gone, running across the field toward her house, leaving me standing in the barn with the smell of rain and hay, and the ghost of her perfume. I stood there for a long time, replaying her words, trying to understand them. "You're too young to understand love," but I wasn't. I understood it perfectly. I was in love with her, completely, hopelessly. What I didn't understand was why she looked at me with such sadness, why her voice broke when she talked about reaching for dangerous things, and why, when she thought I wasn't looking, she stared at my father's house with eyes full of something I couldn't name. That evening, I was in my room when I heard my father's patrol car pull up earlier than usual. It was barely 9 o'clock. He usually didn't come home until midnight. I heard his boots on the porch. Then, voices. Low. A woman's voice. "Sarah." I went to my window. Carefully, quietly. Looked down at the side yard. They weren't there. I heard them, though. Voices coming from behind the house, from the old storage shed my father used as an office sometimes, when he needed to be alone. I slipped out of my room, down the stairs, out the back door. The shed had a small window, grimy, but I could see through it if I stood on the woodpile. I climbed up, looked inside. My father had his back to me, still in uniform. Sarah faced him. Even in the dim light from the single bulb, I could see she'd been crying. 20 years, Robert." Her voice was raw. 20 years I've waited. Don't I deserve?" "Deserve?" My father's voice was sharp, hard. "What you deserve and what you can have are two different things." He turned slightly. I saw his face. It wasn't gentle. It was angry, almost cruel. "You came here knowing this couldn't happen, knowing I have a son, a position." A badge?" Sarah's voice broke. "Is that what this is about? Your precious badge?" "It's about who I am. What I represent to this town." Sarah stepped closer to him, reached for his chest. Her fingers found the badge pinned there, grabbed it. Not gently, like she wanted to rip it off. This piece of metal is more important than—" My father grabbed her wrist, pushed her hand away. Hard. She stumbled back. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Sarah lunged forward again, grabbed the badge with both hands, clung to it. To him. "Please," she whispered. "Please, Robert. Just this summer. Just give me this summer." My father's face twisted. I'd never seen him look like that, like he was in pain, like he was being torn apart. He grabbed her shoulders. For a second, I thought he was going to shake her or push her away again. Instead, he pulled her close, kissed her, hard, desperate. Her hands were still clutching his badge, his uniform, like if she let go, she'd drown. The badge pulled free, fell, hit the wooden floor with a dull thud. Neither of them noticed or cared. I stepped down from the woodpile. My legs were shaking. My hands were shaking. Everything was shaking. The badge. She'd ripped his badge off. And he'd let her. He'd kissed her while his badge fell to the floor. I stumbled back to the house, up to my room, closed the door, sat on my bed in the dark, and I understood something then. Something worse than betrayal. My father loved her. But it wasn't the kind of love I'd imagined love to be. It wasn't gentle or noble or pure. It was desperate, violent, destructive. It was the kind of love that makes you rip badges off, that makes you forget who you are, what you stand for, the kind of love that destroys everything it touches. I don't know when he came home that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting for his boots on the stairs. When I finally heard them, it was past midnight. He moved quietly, like he was trying not to wake me. I heard him pause outside my door, heard him stand there for a long moment. Then he moved on, to his room, closed the door. The next morning, I came downstairs late, hoping he'd already left for work. But he was there, sitting at the kitchen table, in uniform, badge polished and pinned to his chest like always. He was cleaning his gun, the usual morning ritual, taking it apart, oiling each piece, putting it back together. The metal sounds filled the kitchen. Click, slide, click. I poured myself a bowl of cereal, sat down, started eating. He didn't look up, just kept working on his gun. Click, slide, click. I chewed. The cereal was too loud in my mouth, each bite echoing. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The metal sounds, the chewing sounds. Nothing else. Finally, without looking up, my father spoke. "You sleep all right?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Click, slide, click. More silence, more cereal, more metal sounds. He finished with the gun, holstered it, picked up his coffee, took a sip, then he reached for his badge, started polishing it with his handkerchief, the way he did every morning, small circular motions, making it shine. I watched him. This man, who was my father, this man whose badge had fallen to the floor last night, this man who was sitting here now like nothing had happened, like he was still the same man, like the badge still meant the same thing. He caught me watching, looked at me over his coffee. "Something on your mind, son?" "Everything," I wanted to say. "Everything is on my mind. I saw you. I saw what you are. I saw the badge fall. But I said, no, sir." "Good." He pinned the badge back on. "Perfect. Straight. I've got an early shift. I'll be home late." He stood, put on his hat. walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "Tommy?" "Yes, sir." "Stay away from the Mitchell house today. Sarah's. She's not feeling well. Best to give her some space." "Yes, sir." He left. The door closed. The patrol car started, drove away, and I sat there with my bowl of soggy cereal, alone in the kitchen, alone with the knowledge that I could never look at him the same way again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying what I'd seen. My father's hand on Sarah's face, the badge in the dirt, her body shaking with sobs. I wanted to be angry, wanted to hate them both, but all I felt was hollow. When morning came, I heard my father's boots on the stairs. Heard him making coffee in the kitchen like it was just another day. Like he hadn't stood under an oak tree last night and touched a woman the way a man touches his last hope. I couldn't face him. I slipped out the back door while he was in the shower, walked into the cornfield. The corn was taller now, over my head. I could get lost in here if I wanted. Disappear into the green. Let the rows swallow me up. I walked without direction, just walked, trying to make sense of it. How long had it been going on? Was it just this summer? Or was there history I didn't know about? My mother had been dead for 4 years, but somehow I felt like I was betraying her memory by not being angrier, by understanding, even just a little, why my father might reach for something. Someone. I heard movement in the next row. Stopped. Listened. "Tommy? Is that you?" Sarah's voice. I could have run. Should have run. But I stayed where I was, separated from her by one wall of corn. "I know you're there. I can hear you breathing. Go away, Sarah." Silence. Then, "You saw us last night, didn't you?" I closed my eyes. "I don't want to talk about it." "Tommy, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you're in love with my father?" I figured that out. I heard her move closer. Saw her shape through the corn stalks. She didn't cross into my row, just stood there, one wall between us. "It's not. It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" "Seems pretty simple to me. You came here for him, not for a summer vacation. For him." "Yes." Her voice was small. "Yes, I came for him." "Why? Why now?" She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thick, like she was crying. "Before your mother, before any of this, your father and I were—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "We knew each other. Years ago. When I was barely an adult. Before I knew what I was doing. Before I understood anything." The world tilted. I grabbed a cornstalk to steady myself. "What?" "We were young. Both of us were so young. Or at least I was. He seemed like he had his whole life figured out. And I thought—" Her voice broke. "I thought I mattered to him. That what we had was real, permanent." "What happened?" "Your mother came to visit. My sister. She was everything I wasn't. Light where I was dark. Easy where I was difficult. And your father." She took a breath. "He chose her, married her, built a life I thought would be mine. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. I left, went to the city, built a different life, tried to forget him. But you couldn't." "No, I couldn't. And when I heard about your mother passing, I thought maybe She stopped, started again. But he's the sheriff, a good man. And I'm just the woman who couldn't let go, who came back hoping for something that was already dead. I pushed through the corn, stood facing her. She looked terrible, eyes red, face blotchy, hair tangled. "Does he love you?" She looked at me, really looked at me. "Yes, but he loves his duty more, his town, his badge, his integrity. He won't leave that for me. Won't risk his reputation, his son." "So what happens now?" "Now?" She smiled. It was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. "Now I go back to the city, back to my life. And your father stays here and keeps being the man everyone thinks he is. The man everyone needs him to be. What about what you need?" "What I need doesn't matter. It never has." She reached out, touched my face the way my father had touched hers. Gentle. "Goodbye. I'm sorry, Tommy. I'm sorry for using you, for letting you think. I knew you had feelings for me, and I let it happen because it felt good to be wanted by someone, even if it was just a boy with a crush. I'm not a boy. No, you're not. Not anymore." She dropped her hand. "I'm leaving tomorrow, going back to Richmond. This summer. It was a mistake. All of it." She turned to go. I watched her walk away through the corn, watched her yellow dress disappear into the green, and I realized something. I wasn't heartbroken because she didn't love me. I was heartbroken because I understood her. Because I knew what it felt like to want something you could never have. To stand in the shadow of someone perfect and realize you would never be enough. Because I'd spent the whole summer loving her the way she'd spent years, decades, maybe, loving my father, hopelessly, painfully, without any chance of being loved back. I came back to the house as the sun was setting. My father was on the porch, still in his uniform, badge polished and pinned to his chest like nothing had happened, like his world hadn't just walked away. He looked up when I approached. His face was unreadable. "Where have you been?" "Walking. Sarah Mitchell's leaving tomorrow, going back to the city." "I know." He studied me. His jaw worked, like he wanted to say something. Like there were words caught in his throat that he couldn't force out. "Finally, there are things about the past, things you don't understand. Things that happened before you were born." "I understand more than you think." His jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" I could have told him. Could have said, "I saw you. I saw you touch her. I saw your badge fall. I know she came here for you. I know you're not who I thought you were." But I didn't. Because I understood something else too. My father wasn't a hypocrite. He wasn't weak. He was just a man who'd made a choice once, years ago. And that choice had shaped everything that came after. His marriage, his work, me. He'd chosen duty over desire, order over chaos, the badge over whatever she had been to him. It was killing him, but he'd done it anyway. And he'd keep doing it, because that's who he was. The kind of man who polishes his badge every morning even when his hands shake. Who sits across from his son and pretends the world makes sense. Who lives in the house his choices built, even when it feels like a tomb. "Nothing," I said. "It doesn't mean anything." The next morning, I watched from my window as Sarah loaded her suitcase into her pale blue Chevrolet. Mrs. Mitchell stood on the porch, waving, crying a little. My father's patrol car was in the driveway, but he didn't come out, didn't say goodbye. Sarah looked at our house for a long time. I thought maybe she was looking for him. But then her eyes found my window, Found me. She raised her hand, a small wave, a sad smile. I lifted my hand, pressed it against the glass. Then she got in her car and drove away. I stood at the window long after she was gone, long after the dust settled on the road, long after the sound of her engine faded to nothing behind me. I heard my father's bedroom door open, heard his boots on the stairs, heard him pause at the bottom, like he wanted to come to me, to say something. But he didn't. He just walked out the door, got in his patrol car, went to work, and I stood in my room with my hand still on the glass, 16 years old and feeling like I'd aged a lifetime in one summer. That night, I went to my father's room. He was at work. The house was empty. His badge was on the dresser where it always was, polished, perfect, like it had never fallen in the dirt. I picked it up, held it in my hand the way I had when I was little. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe I was just tired of carrying the weight of what it represented. I thought about throwing it away, about breaking it, about doing something to make my father feel the pain I felt. But I didn't. I just put it back, carefully, exactly where it had been. Because that's what we do. We pick up the pieces, polish them, pretend nothing broke, and we go on.
I blinked. The memory faded. I was back in the cemetery, 1972. My father's funeral. The mourners were leaving, shaking my hand, offering condolences I didn't hear. The preacher had finished. The grave was being filled. Sarah still stood beside me, her hand still on my arm. "You never came back," she said quietly, "after that summer. You left for college. Then the war. You never came home. There was nothing to come home to. Your father missed you." I looked at her, really looked at her. She'd aged, lines around her eyes, gray in her hair, but still beautiful, still the woman who'd taught me that love isn't what the songs say it is. Did he? My voice was flat. Or did he miss the idea of having a son who still believed in him? She flinched. "Tommy, tell me something, Sarah. All those years, the letters, the secret visits. Did you ever ask yourself what you were doing? Or were you too busy clinging to something that was already dead? That's not fair." "Fair?" I almost laughed. "You want to talk about fair? I was 16. I watched my father's badge fall in the dirt while he—" I stopped, took a breath. "You want to know what I learned that summer? I learned that the people we're supposed to trust are just as lost as the rest of us, maybe more lost, because they have further to fall." Silence. The gravediggers were finishing, patting down the earth, placing flowers. Sarah's voice was small. "He wanted you to have this." She pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "He left it with me before he died." I unwrapped it. My father's badge. But different now. An engraving on the back. Fresh. Recent. For Tommy. Duty and love are not enemies. They are both ways of being brave. Dad. I stared at it. At the words. At the weight of it in my hand. "He wrote that 2 weeks before he died," Sarah said. "He wanted you to know. He wanted you to understand that he tried. That choosing duty over desire isn't weakness. It's just a different kind of love." I closed my fingers around the badge. "Did he love you?" "Yes. Did you destroy him? Or did he destroy you?" She looked at me for a long moment. "I don't know anymore.
Maybe both. Maybe that's what love is sometimes. Mutual destruction. Then what was the point? The point? She smiled, sad, broken. There is no point, Tommy. There's just what we survive, what we carry, what we learn to live with. She touched my hand one last time. Goodbye, Tommy Hayes. She walked away through the cemetery, past the headstones, out through the iron gates. I stood there, alone with my father's grave, with his badge, with the weight of that summer 10 years gone, but still somehow present. Something fluttered near the gravestone, a piece of paper, caught against the flowers. I picked it up. My father's handwriting, part of a letter. The ink faded, rain damaged. Don't know if what I feel is love or just the need to possess something beautiful before it slips away. Maybe there's no difference. Maybe wanting and loving are the same destruction wearing different faces. I tell myself I'm protecting Tommy by staying away from her. But perhaps I'm just a coward who... The rest was torn away. Gone. I held the scrap of paper. Read it again. And again. Did he love her? Or did he just want to own her? To control something in a life that felt out of control? I'd never know. And maybe that was the real lesson. That we never truly know what's in another person's heart, even when that person is your father. I watched it go, tumbling through the gravestones, disappearing into the trees. Some questions don't have answers. Some mysteries stay mysteries. And maybe that's okay. I pinned the badge to my jacket, over my heart, where it belonged, or where I was choosing to believe it belonged. Then I walked down the hill.
The end.
Okay, folks, let me reveal the origin. This story was inspired by Ivan Turgenev's First Love, written in 1860. A 16-year-old boy, a woman in her 20s. His father, the same triangle, the same devastation. Turgenev's original was darker, more violent. The father struck the woman with a riding crop. She kissed the mark he left. Love as possession, as power, as degradation. We changed the whip to a badge. Russia to Virginia. Aristocrats to a small-town sheriff and a college girl from the city. But the pain? That stayed the same. This pattern repeats across cultures. French coming-of-age novels, Japanese eye novels, German Bildungsroman. Every culture tells this story in its own language. A young person falls in love, discovers the adult world is more complicated than they imagined, learns that the people they trust have their own desires, their own failures, their own broken dreams, and in learning this, they become adults themselves. Turgenev's boy Vladimir says at the end, "I learned what it meant to love, and I learned that I would never love like that again." That's what first love does. It's not practice, it's the real thing. The thing that happens before you learn to protect yourself. Some loves become part of who we are, shaping every love that comes after. And perhaps the question is this: when we love someone, are we loving them, or just trying to hold on to something beautiful before it slips away? Tommy's father never answered that question. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe none of us do.
For more stories next time, please subscribe and like us. Thank you.